5 contestants remain. Taz checks his food store and finds his chicken meat infested with maggots, suspecting his smoking technique was insufficient. Seeing the wriggling proteins, he's actually thrilled. He covers his storage and heads to the lake, finding his gill net empty again as fish move to deeper waters due to the cold. Hunting seems more reliable. Taz picks up his bow and arrows and mimics the sound of a mating stag using birch bark to attract a buck. Instead, he startles a partridge in a tree, quickly shoots, and misses. He loses 2 arrows. Contestants can carry up to 9 arrows, and each lost arrow decreases his chance of winning by 10%. Desperately searching, he finally finds them, and even the fleeing partridge. Calmly pulling his bow, he successfully hunts the partridge, moved to tears by his catch. Luck continues as he finds another on his way back, capturing it as well. On the other hand, White, despite losing 2 baits, maintains his quality of life. He catches a large fish weighing around 5 or 6 pounds, securing a week's meals. Sadly, the fish breaks through the net, and at this critical time for stocking food, White cannot afford any accidents. He immediately starts making a new net back at camp. Day 26 quickly arrived. Melanie, who didn't appear much on camera, has been surviving on grass. To cook moss better, she built a simple kitchen. Moss is a scarce dietary fiber, but eating too much can cause diarrhea and stomach cramps. The best solution is to repeatedly boil it to reduce its acidity. After finishing, she started walking nearby, hoping to find mushrooms and berries. After walking 2 kilometers, she found blueberries and began to pick and eat them. For now, she might survive on wild fruits and moss, but once the heavy snow falls and plants wither, where will Melanie go? Mickey faces the same dilemma. Lacking protein, his tryptophan levels dropped, causing severe insomnia. He spends nights sharpening knives to pass the time, making them so sharp they easily shave off hair. Not wanting to suffer from insomnia any longer, he heads to the mountains to hunt at dawn. After finding nothing, he picks berries to survive, quickly collecting a full bag. On the way back, he discovers a wooden box, perfect for making a door at home. He uses 2 pine logs for the frame, nails the planks, and saws off the excess. His triangular door is completed. As plants yellow and winter approaches, White stays busy stacking firewood on days he doesn't fish. He believes staying warm is as crucial as food. After working, he checks his gill net, which is 1 meter long and weighs over 30 kilograms. Smoking is undoubtedly the best option for longer preservation of fish meat. Day 27 quickly arrived. Allan was fishing by the lake again. With his fishing line, he has already caught over 20 fish. After eating and drinking, he starts building a smoking room. Only by storing excess meat can he last till the end. After laying the last piece of moss, he returns to fish by the lake. He immediately catches a big fish and hurriedly drags it ashore. In his haste, the reel falls into the water. Decisively, he strips to retrieve it. Fortunately, the reel hadn't completely sunk, allowing him to recover it. After returning to camp, he quickly began smoking the fish. Once he arranged the sliced fish, he sought the right kind of firewood. Only low-fat birch and willow can produce healthy, delicious smoked fish. Watching the rich fish meat slowly change color, Taz, boosted by 2 partridges, put the finishing touches on his shelter. Just as he finished, the weather suddenly changed, forcing him to abandon his hunting plans and stay indoors for self-entertainment. Faced with the sudden weather change, everyone clearly lacked good coping strategies. Those with stored food ate meat at home, while those without relied on passive skills to endure. Mickey, who had been drinking water for several days, couldn't bear the hunger anymore and took his bow and arrows back into the mountains. Surprisingly, he soon encountered a partridge. Silently drawing his bow, he shot an arrow, and a second later, a dark shadow fell from the sky. Mickey quickly moved forward to pick up his trophy. On day 30, a loud noise woke Melanie. After quickly checking outside, she discovered her storage room had collapsed, containing her winter firewood. After a quick cleanup, she returned to the shelter to continue enjoying a berry feast. But as she ate, she suddenly lost control and burst into tears, overwhelmed by her longing for her boyfriend. Unable to fish or hunt, how much longer could Melanie endure? Once the weather slightly improved, Allan eagerly checked on the smoked fish, relieved to find everything normal. He then took out paracord and spruce wood, and after some simple processing, had a new lure. Casting it several times by the lake, he soon had a big fish on the hook. Allan quickly reeled it in, but just as it was about to reach the shore, it got off the hook. However, as the season's fishing king, Allan didn't give up. He continued to try and kept losing the hook. After repeated disappointments, he finally gave up. White had already stored a lot of fish meat, but knew that to win the $500,000, his current supplies weren't enough. So, he planned to hunt a large animal before the harsh winter arrived. However, the previous day's violent storms had severely damaged his gill net. Not wanting his fishing efforts to be in vain, he quickly repaired the net. Taking the mended net to the lake, he placed it where he had caught a big fish last time, hoping to catch a 30-pound lake trout. An accident had occurred 7 days earlier. A piece of firewood had pierced his arm, leaving a deep, still bleeding wound, likely infected. But he refused to give up, boiling spruce water daily for disinfection, praying it wouldn't force him to withdraw from the competition. A few days later, his arm had fully healed. Without hesitation, he grabbed his new bait and went back to his usual spot to fish. Within minutes, he had a bite and quickly reeled in a large fish weighing about 5 or 6 kilograms, securing a week's worth of food. Riding his success, he cast his line again, but his joy turned to sorrow as he watched his last bait fly away. Without bait, he could no longer fish. However, he quickly recovered, took his bow and arrows, and headed into the forest to try his luck. Soon, he encountered game. Without any hesitation, he drew his bow and shot an arrow. A grouse fell in the distance. As White marveled at his fortune, he heard a noise nearby and quickly released another arrow, adding a small squirrel to his catch. His luck didn't end there. When he checked his gill net at the lake, he found another big fish. This turn of events maximized the show's impact. Unless something unexpected happened, White was likely to be this season's champion. Day 31 arrived, and Allan woke up to find his face had sunken in further. Since the start of the contest, he had lost 33 kilograms, just a step away from being forced to withdraw. His only hope was his gill net. Approaching it, he indeed found something: a greedy duck entangled in the net. But since this method of hunting didn't comply with the show's rules, Allan reluctantly chose to release the duck. Before he could repair the net, he tried fishing, but the rough conditions were not ideal. As the weather grew colder, the fish had moved to deeper waters. Despite trying a few casts, he ended up seeing not even a glimpse of a fish. Taz, not wanting to be awakened by the cold night wind again, decided to install a large door on his shelter. He chopped several logs with an axe, measured the door frame, and used wire to tie the frame together. He chose several even branches, stripped the bark, arranged them neatly, and secured everything with nails to create a refined door. Not wanting to waste the remaining materials, he finished crafting a chair and tested it, uttering a comfortable grunt. After all this work, he felt hungry. With high hopes, he opened his storage box, but the sight that greeted him nearly made him vomit. The grouse he had been reluctant to eat was crawling with disgusting maggots. Taz didn't want to waste the food, but he couldn't bring himself to eat it as it was. Resolved, he simply cleaned off the surface maggots and boiled the grouse vigorously. On day 32 of the survival challenge, Melanie had lost 30 kg. Since the start, she had been unable to catch fish or hunt game, surviving only on berries and tree bark. Now she had consumed all the food around her camp and had to search farther away. Due to prolonged malnutrition, her legs felt as heavy as if they were filled with lead, and she nearly collapsed upon reaching her destination. However, she collected a full bag of berries, which somewhat consoled her injured heart. Meanwhile, across the lake, Allan was repairing his damaged gill net, but his mood worsened as a storm approached. Thinking it might get damaged again, he decided to try his luck in the forest, following moose tracks to the lake, where he planned to ambush the moose and fish. Soon, there was movement on his fishing line, but his excitement caused the fish to unhook. After casting again, the fish fell off as he pulled it ashore, watching big fish escape repeatedly. Even strong Allan eventually broke down. As the sun set without any sign of the moose, he packed up and headed back. Unlike the other contestants, Mickey, besides capturing protein sources, never wasted a single calorie. He spent his free time crafting, like carving a top for his son, which made him miss home even more. To ease his homesickness, Mickey decided to go out again, hoping to find some protein. After a fruitless search, he was about to return home when he heard chirping in the forest. Quickly grabbing his bow and arrow, he targeted and shot, dropping a dark shadow. He efficiently cleaned his catch by the lake and roasted it without any seasonings. Mickey enjoyed his meal thoroughly, not sparing even the brains. Yesterday, Taz had risked eating a maggot-infested grouse, but fortunately felt no ill effects today. However, his stored food hung by the door had been stolen. With no choice, he pinned his hopes on the gill net, but the strong wind had tangled it up, leaving him with no catch and a big repair job. For now, he had to rely on hunting. He made traps from wire and set many in the forest, hoping to catch some squirrels to improve his diet. As day 34 arrived, he took his fishing hook and started fishing again. Learning from his previous experience with escaping fish, he deliberately enlarged the hook's gap, hoping for a successful catch this time. After countless attempts, as darkness approached, the long-awaited movement finally came from the fishing line. He quickly reeled in and swiftly retrieved his catch, successfully securing a small lake trout without it escaping. Without resting, Allan pursued further success, and soon another fish bit. Upon dragging it to shore, he discovered it was an enormous barracuda. Excited, Allan exerted a strong pull, but tragically, the line snapped, and the lure disappeared with it. Allan reflected that it was the biggest barracuda he had ever seen. On day 36 of the survival challenge, Taz, equipped with homemade gear, began his fishing early by the lake. He cast his line dozens of times until the sun began to rise, and finally, there was movement on his hook. He quickly set the hook and reeled in the line, landing a modest-sized lakefish. Seeing the feeding window for the fish, Taz decided to capitalize on his success and catch a few more. Perhaps due to good luck or hard work, he soon caught a barracuda weighing 5 or 6 pounds. Satisfied, Taz returned to camp with his prizes, skillfully gutted and cleaned them, putting the guts and fish heads in a pot to boil for soup while smoking the meat on a rack. Minutes later, the delicious fish soup was ready. Just as Taz was about to enjoy his meal, a strange noise came from the woods. He grabbed his bow and arrow and rushed out. Following a flurry of bow drawing and shooting, he returned with a mink in hand, the very creature that had stolen his fish twice. He quickly skinned it and cleaned the insides, then cooked it over a high fire until the skin split and the meat was tender. With winter's arrival, obtaining food became increasingly difficult. Forced by circumstances, Mickey began to economize meticulously. He ground leftover bones into powder, mixed them with berries, and mashed the mixture into a paste to make a nutritious Mexican meatloaf. Although the taste might not be perfect, it could at least sustain him for 2 more days. After finishing, he took his bow and arrow and went out for his daily hunt. Seeing berries, he couldn't resist collecting them fervently, planning to process them into fruit leather to prevent spoilage. He first crushed them in an iron pot, then wrapped and squeezed out the moisture with a sock. He placed the fruit pulp on the stove to roast. 10 minutes later, the wilderness fruit leather was ready. Meanwhile, Wyatt faced a new problem. His injured arm oozed white fluid again, undoubtedly infected. However, he ignored it, considering a bandage sufficient treatment. For him, fishing was the priority, needing to stock up on food before the snowfall. But the cold weather soon froze his hands. After half a day's effort without any catch, day 37 arrived, a windy day. To solve the difficulty of starting a fire, Melanie planned to fix up the outdoor kitchen. She increased the height of the walls and filled the gaps with decaying birch bark. After these tasks, she boiled herself a pot of water, drinking it voraciously. Surviving on water daily, she worried about her body's ability to endure. On day 37 of the survival challenge, Mickey, constantly disturbed by rats, couldn't sleep. He set traps indoors and caught several rats. After skinning and plucking, the aroma of grilled meat instantly spread far and wide. Allan's house also had rats. His wife's handmade sweater had a big hole chewed in it. Allan quickly found 2 stones, propped them up with branches to make a 4-shaped trap, determined to catch the entire Jerry family. As he finished and was about to continue sleeping, he suddenly felt something crawl over him. In a moment of panic, he swung his hand in a swift motion. Turning on the light, he saw a Jerry dead on the spot. Now wide awake, Allan took out his newly improved lure, confident it could catch even the biggest fish. However, Actual attempts were less successful, as repeated casts attracted no bites. Just as Allan was about to give up and leave, a sudden noise came from the bushes behind him. He quietly took up his bow and arrow and soon spotted his target. Holding his breath, he drew a full bow. It was his first time hitting a grouse. After such a long struggle, he was finally able to change his diet, smiling so wide his face could trap mosquitoes. Since Taz had a food reserve, he now walked with a swagger. Today, he planned to check the traps he had set earlier and take a hike, hoping for a chance encounter with a moose. Unfortunately, the squirrel trap was empty. As he continued deeper into the swamp, the wind picked up, making it impossible to hear any prey. Reluctantly, he had to return. To address his loneliness, Taz showcased his impressive craft skills by carving a beautiful ukulele. Melanie, always seen collecting, never seemed to eat properly. Today she gathered a lot of moss and mushrooms, stir-frying them to evaporate the moisture, then grinding them into powder and boiling it to make a delicious wilderness meal. For 38 days, this has been her diet, and her resilience is truly admirable. On day 39, Taz played and sang at the campsite early in the morning, confidently displaying his talents. He then launched his long-unused canoe into the deep waters, a boat he built early in the competition, believing it to be his key to victory. Once at the lake's center, he started fishing, expecting a good catch as the cold had driven the fish to deeper waters. Unfortunately, reality was harsh, and after a fruitless morning, he returned to shore as the cold worsened. With the snow covering the ground, food became even harder to find. While others collected the last of the berries, Taz embarked on a hunting trip, hoping to catch a large animal. This unrestrained physical exertion eventually took a toll on him. By the time he returned to camp, his movements were noticeably slower. Although Taz never lacked food, he had lost 52 kilograms. Understanding his body's limits, he chose to withdraw from the competition. Taz had a smooth journey, but his frail body could no longer bear the burden. Hopefully, he can recover and return to the competition. On day 42, a blizzard hit Reindeer Lake, arriving just as the anticipated hunting season began. Before setting out, and concerned about possible toxins, he tasted a piece of the recently collected mushrooms. After wandering the forest, he found grouse tracks and followed them to a moving shadow in the trees. Without hesitation, White shot an arrow, bringing the grouse down. Approaching to retrieve it, he noticed more tracks on a nearby stump and discovered another grouse perched there. With no courtesy, he shot a full arrow. Seeing the struggling grouse, White felt a pang of remorse and quickly ended its suffering. Now, he had ingredients for chicken and mushroom stew. Without further ado, he sped back to camp to start plucking the feathers. White is not greedy. He plans to eat one grouse and save the other. He smokes the prepared one over the fire while cleaning the other, which he will toss into a pot for a hearty stew. The camera shifts to Allan, who, seeing the snowy expanse outside, is thrilled. He rushes back to camp to make more arrows. He has lost 3 arrows so far and is determined to protect the remaining 6 by replacing their tips with wood. This weakens their penetration but is still effective for small game. Equipped and stepping outside, he views the calm lake but quickly decides to check his fishing net, which has yet to catch a fish. Disappointed again, he casts a line and soon catches fish after fish, frustratingly losing each one. Annoyed, Allan heads into the forest, hoping to catch a grouse, just like Mickey, who thought hunting would be easier after the heavy snowfall, but found nothing. Mickey intended to conserve energy by resting, but restless thoughts plagued him. To clear his mind, he builds a campfire by the lake, throws in some nails, and hammers them into shape after heating. After quenching the reshaped nails in cold water, he crafts a beautiful gift for his son, using only hemp rope for decoration. Meanwhile, Melanie, who has been surviving on grass, also has her moment of triumph. She catches a mouse in her trap, her second source of protein in over 40 days. She quickly cleans it, takes Flint to her outdoor kitchen, and cooks it with moss over a fierce fire. After eating the almost fully cooked meal, she feels instantly energized and loudly declares her command over the competition. As for White, since hunting the grouse, he has been hibernating at home, only moving when the firewood for heating runs low. Maintaining a 24-hour fire requires at least 30 logs a day, which is physically taxing, especially on an empty stomach. Busy with work, His previously injured right arm starts hurting again. He stops, returns to camp holding the firewood, rolls up his sleeve, and sees the swollen area around the wound. Considering the risk of infection, White decides to handle it immediately. Gritting his teeth, he uses pliers to pull out a splinter. The pain nearly knocks him out, but the removal of the splinter miraculously heals the abscess. Day 43 has arrived. Today is Allan's 52nd birthday. Despite being alone in the wilderness, he maintains a sense of ceremony. He generously takes out 3 pieces of smoked fish and makes a sandwich cake to celebrate. Usually, he only eats half a slice each day, but today, he indulgently cooks a whole piece. Half an hour later, a delicious birthday feast is ready. Next, it's time to enjoy the tasty meal. After eating, Allan checks his fishing net. Although it has been over 40 days without any catch, he still hopes for a surprise today. As the net is slowly pulled out of the water, seeing the large fish hanging on it, Allan excitedly babbles incoherently. This is the biggest fish he has caught in the competition, and also a birthday gift from heaven. After cleaning the big fish, night has fallen. Looking at the beautiful aurora in the sky, he suddenly has a bold idea and sets off a bear flare. Meanwhile, since Melanie ate mouse meat, her inner desires have been fully ignited. Today, she even considers fishing in the lake, perhaps due to a lack of real experience from her vegetarian diet, or maybe there just aren't any fish in the stream. She tries hard for half a day, but brings back no catch, dejectedly returning to her shelter. Feeling defeated, she cries and makes a satellite phone call. Facing the camera of the crew, this woman who has survived 43 days on grass finally shows a brilliant smile again. By day 45, although he eats fish every day, half a fish is not enough to sustain him. Visibly, he has developed 8 abs. Seeing that the day is sunny, neither cold nor hot, he quickly heads to the lake to stock up. Since winter began, he hasn't caught any fish, and his reserves are nearly depleted. If he doesn't catch anything, he'll have to eat less. Just when he thinks today might be another fruitless day, he hurriedly drags it ashore, catching a 9.5-pound big fish, securing 3 days' worth of meals. But when he cuts open the fish's belly, he sees these white noodles. No doubt, the fish has a tapeworm infection. To eat or not to eat, Allan faces a dilemma. After much hesitation, he decides to risk it. He quickly cuts the trout in half, saving some in the smoker and cooking the rest over high heat in an iron pot. Half an hour later, a delicious meal is ready, and Allan apprehensively begins to eat. Enjoying such perfect weather for the outdoors, White takes his gear and enters the forest. Tired of eating fish every day, he needs some protein for a change of taste. Soon he crosses the forest to the lake, seeing a fish on the net from a distance. Eagerly, he sets down his gear and starts to retrieve it. After an indescribable struggle, he pulls up a 9-pound big white fish. Carrying the big fish back to shore, he scrapes off the scales, cleans out the innards, and uses a small knife to cut it into pieces. Survival challenge. Day 46. Reindeer Island is completely covered in snow. Mickey heads out with a bow and arrows to hunt. He thought hunting would be easier after the snow, but he only found a trail of mouse tracks. The biting cold at his feet warned him of potential frostbite, forcing him to abandon the hunt and return to the shelter. So far, Mickey has lost over 60 pounds. The rapid burning of fat leaves him physically and mentally exhausted, but he pushes himself to continue for the prize money to treat his son's illness. He makes a simple trap with sticks and stones, hoping to catch a few mice to regain some strength. Elsewhere, Allan complains about an unscrupulous merchant. His sleeping bag, supposed to withstand -40 degrees, almost froze him last night. However, the good news is after eating fish with viruses, he feels no discomfort. Seeing the calm lake, he immediately rushes to the shore with his fishing gear. In the freezing cold, it's easy to lose feeling in one's hands, which could lead to accidents. Luckily, he reacts quickly and grabs the fishing line to avoid loss. After this ordeal, Allan loses the desire to continue fishing. By day 47, several mice have been trapped. Though small and not very meaty, they are a lifesaver for Mickey. He carefully skins the mice, fills them with moss and weeds, and meticulously sews them up with wire. A genuine leather mouse toy is created, the 4th birthday gift for his son since arriving. After finishing, the roasted mouse meat is ready, and Mickey eagerly begins to eat. Though the meat is indeed scant, the partridge killed 2 days ago and the 9-pound fish caught today are still not enough for White to feel confident in winning. He decides he needs a bigger catch. After searching the jungle for 3 hours without seeing any animals, he pins his hopes on his gill net, anticipating a big fish today. His hopeful mood pays off as he catches a 30-pound barracuda. To conserve energy, Mickey has been staying indoors doing crafts for 2 days, only venturing out when extremely hungry. He decides to try eating reindeer moss, pretending it's sauerkraut. Though edible, improper handling can cause stomach cramps, which has led many contestants to withdraw in the past. Yesterday's toilet paper, today's brunch. Mickey reluctantly tries a bite and finds it not as bad as expected. He cooks another pot to keep for dinner. While waiting, he starts another craft project, a garlic day present for his wife to improve her cooking skills. While busy, he suddenly sees a mink passing by. Local regulations prohibit trapping, but allow shooting with arrows. Mickey does not hesitate to pursue this protein gift. As he prepares to shoot, the mink disappears. Back at the shelter, he finds the mouse toy made for his son and the stockpiled minced meat cakes all gone, likely the work of the mink he just saw. Day 50 arrived quickly. Heavy snow once again swept over Reindeer Island. Looking at the dreamlike snowscape, White shouted excitedly. Happy as he was, he did not want to freeze like a dog at night again, so he decided to collect some firewood. He had already stored plenty of food, and as long as he kept warm and avoided accidents, he could stay indoors without foraging and outlast the other contestants. In contrast, Allan became restless. Seeing that the lake was not frozen, he ran to the lakeside and started fishing. However, as the temperature continued to drop, the fish moved further from the shore. After casting his line dozens of times without a bite, he didn't want to give up, but prolonged exposure to the cold wind made his limbs extremely stiff. Not wanting a repeat of yesterday's tragedy, he returned to camp empty-handed, warmed up, and cooked himself a fish soup. At this stage of the challenge, plants had already withered and berries were buried deep. Proteins had also hidden away for the winter, making it very hard to find food. As night fell, White returned to the shelter, which was on fire. Fortunately, he reacted quickly, scrambled up, and extinguished the flames with a pot of water. Back inside, he dared not be careless, carefully checking if any embers remained on his clothes. After the commotion, White couldn't sleep, so he sat by the fire until daylight. He went outside to check the cause of the fire, which turned out to be the moss used to fill gaps. He removed all the dry moss, brought in a lot of stones, and rebuilt the structure to prevent another tragedy. Meanwhile, Mickey sang a birthday song early in the morning to send blessings to his 5-year-old son far away. Although he had made many gifts during this time, not being with his son on his birthday still pained his heart deeply. He immediately picked up his equipment, went outside to look for protein, and focused solely on hunting for food. White's days were quite comfortable. Although the shelter's fire startled him into a cold sweat, he inadvertently developed new cooking skills. However, located within the Arctic Circle, if there wasn't enough firewood for heating, seeing the heavy snow and biting cold outside, Allan chose to stay indoors to minimize energy consumption. Even though his food supplies were dwindling, his determination to win never wavered, as long as the producers didn't force him out, vowing to outlast others for over 100 days. By day 54, the snow had finally stopped. White stepped out of the camp looking towards Reindeer Lake, and seeing that the lake wasn't entirely frozen, he geared up to explore, hoping to find grouse or moose for a change in diet, dreaming of a moose steak. But the area was truly barren, and he didn't encounter even a trace of protein. Seeing the ice-encased fishing nets cooled his heart further. Yet, he didn't give up, cautiously stepping onto the icy rocks, nearly falling into the lake. After a fierce struggle and hopeful fishing, he caught nothing. By day 55, Allan was collecting firewood by the lake while checking the ice's thickness, estimating a few more days before he could ice fish. He started making ice-breaking shoes early due to prolonged malnutrition, feeling exhausted inside and out. The branches alone tired him, forcing him to stop often. It took him a whole day to finish, nearly freezing outdoors. Meanwhile, Mickey hadn't left the camp in days. Suddenly, the sound of beeping indicated a message from the producers for a medical checkup. Due to a long period without sufficient calories, his body was on the brink of collapse. Even dressing was difficult. When the crew arrived en masse at the camp, Mickey was already waiting outside, shivering. They had to return indoors for a checkup. To the medical team's surprise, his toes had already lost sensation, risking permanent damage. While the staff discussed options, Mickey, already in tears indoors, decided to leave on his own terms, which looked better than being forced to quit. By day 57, Allan, who had been rationing his food, felt dizzy and blurred vision due to hunger. He knew he couldn't last much longer without an energy boost. Ice fishing was his only hope. Putting on the snowshoes he had made earlier, he shakily made his way to the center of the lake, chopped a hole in the ice with an axe, and gathered a large amount of moss. He was ready to start fishing immediately. On day 58, after a failed ice fishing attempt, White took out an abandoned gill net. He planned to repair it and use it again in the lake so he wouldn't have to stand on the ice in the cold wind. With the ice ladder and gill net, he returned to the usual spot, chopped a rectangular hole in the ice, used logs as anchors, and lowered the gill net under the ice. In the blink of an eye, the automatic fishing device was set up. Then he went back to camp, sat by the fire, and comfortably slurped fish soup. While roasting, his toenails fell off unexpectedly, but he felt no other discomfort. This minor injury was nothing to White, but what happened next almost ended in tragedy. The fierce fire spread quickly, frightening White. He threw all his fresh water on it to extinguish the flames. During this time, White killed a mouse for an extra meal, and a black bear nearly scared Allan to death outside his camp. In this cold, lonely, and hungry state, they endured until day 62. White wanted to fetch some water on day 62, but when he reached the lake, he saw that the ice layer had been destroyed by the overnight gale, damaging his gill net as well. Disheartened, he returned to camp and chewed on boiled fish slices, venting his frustration. By day 64, as the first rays of the new day's sun appeared, White had an epiphany. With a loving wife, sensible children, and a job that could support his family, he wondered why he was enduring hardship in this forsaken place. He immediately made a phone call. As the crew arrived at the camp, White officially ended his challenge. After White's departure, only Allan remained. If he passed the medical check, he would be the winner. The crew discreetly issued a notice, and Allan conducted a self-check. Regardless of the outcome, he was ready. As the helicopter landed, the medical checks began. Although he had lost a significant amount of weight, his bodily functions were normal. At that moment, someone walked up from behind. It was then that Allan realized he had won. Not only would he take home the $500,000 prize, but he also added a remarkable achievement to his experiences. Later, he brought his wife to visit the camp and shared his experiences.